Hey, so I wanted to make a point here about how your desires spring from your state. And I need to use myself as an example here because this is where this always comes from. There's always one that comes up and it's really obvious to me. So in order to illustrate this point, I've talked on this channel about how I went from being an obese person to a thin person. I've talked about how I did it, but the main Neville Goddard formula of imagining persisting in the state, going through a bridge of incidents and arriving at the thing being manifest in your reality applies. It doesn't matter how I did it, which was diet and exercise. But every time I talk about this, the only thing that a certain group of people can focus on is the diet and exercise part. This happens every time I bring this up. In fact, I'll probably get a comment on this video from somebody because people just cannot help themselves. I don't know why. It's just like, it's a trigger for people. And so the comment I always get is some form of, you didn't have to diet or exercise. You could have just persisted in the belief that you're a thin person that eats whatever you want. And this almost always comes from somebody who is overweight. Like the idea of being able to eat whatever you want, which means a very different thing to a person who is a healthy weight than it is to someone who weighs like 300 pounds. That's really only appealing from a certain state. So like, as a person that weighs 300 pounds, you're in this mentality. I can't, there are a million different mentalities for the million different people that have a weight problem. But there's some version of eating way too much going on. Eating to support this weight that is way outside the healthy zone. That's happening. And there's a reason for that. What it is, I don't know. People eat for a lot of they overeat for a lot of reasons. But when you're at that weight, when you're like 300 pounds and you think, what would I ideally want from the state of being 300 pounds and you're probably many failures to try to stop that and all that. Of course, the first thing you think is going to be, God, I'd love to just like be able to do this with no consequences. I'd love to just be able to do the exact same thing I'm doing right now, but without the consequence that I'm experiencing in 3D reality, right? Because you're trying, you're failing, you can't do it. So of course you think, well, I'd like to stop trying and failing. It'd be great to just have it, right? And to be honest with you, starting to, make some mental movement from that state using, this idea of like persisting in a different state is way better than doing nothing, honestly, because I think it will still get you there in the end. The thing is that, if you manage to get somewhere from that mentality, you're going to experience a different state when you're in a different physical state. You move through all these states when you're changing from one thing to the other. And the one thing that I have seen over and over and over again, as I've brought this up many times on forums and on videos and stuff, is there's always a handful, not very many, a handful of other people who have also made a major weight change. And those people, it's like a mixed response, like the things they say. Some of them are like, I totally get it. Like, this was really all about just kind of going the conventional route for me, and the imaginal stuff and the persistence and all the stuff that Neville talks about is the reason why I was successful. And then other people will say, well, I didn't count my calories. I didn't purposely like get on an exercise program. I just told myself that I was going to be at a healthy weight. And then, eventually I got there. And that happened because my appetite dropped. And suddenly I started to walk more. And like, basically, what I've seen with the weight loss people is that, all roads kind of led to the same place, which is that from a certain state, they really kind of did the same thing, whether or not it was like I'm consciously controlling what I'm eating, which appeals to some people like data, some people don't. I can't imagine just like not, I I love tracking stuff and finding patterns and all that stuff. So of course, like, my route was going to be sort of through trial and error, figuring out what worked for me using counting and stuff like that. Where for other people that would suck. It's just an individual thing. But so basically, where everybody ended up was, I got to my healthy weight, and in order to get there, I found that my eating habits and my moving habits sometimes were very different at the actual end goal. Like, nobody ends up that I've ever seen, ever, not a single time, have I ever seen somebody say, I used to weigh 300 pounds and I eat literally exactly the same way that I did then, but because I convinced myself that calories don't really exist, that food doesn't have any calories and doesn't make me fat, now it doesn't. Like, these are all just like different routes to the same place. And when you're in that place, it looks pretty similar. Some people eat like a worse diet, and some people, your idea of what's healthy and mine might be different. And some people have a worse diet, but pretty much take in and burn off the same amount of energy. And so, people pretty much end up in the same place. And so the desire, that everybody seems to have, that when they respond to me, and I think it's mostly overweight people, I've been kind of experimenting with. I don't usually look at who I'm talking to. Like, if somebody asks me a question on Reddit, I'll just respond. But lately, when people have been saying things where I'm just like, dude, it doesn't fucking work that way, like in my mind, I've often lately looked to see who they are, and they're people that have had no success in the thing that they're telling me I should have done a different way. And so, that says a lot. I can tell that they're still in a certain mentality, so they can't figure out why I would want to be at a weight where I couldn't just eat like I weigh 300 pounds with impunity. When you're at a lower weight and in a healthier place mentally, that's just not something that I think most people have an urge to do. The urge to eat to the point where you weigh like 300 pounds is coming from something that needs attention. And, in order to often get down to the place where you've been able to persist enough in not engaging in the behavior that got you there, it's kind of like, you're forced to work through that stuff. And that, I think, is a part of the bridge of incidents for many people when they're changing something like that, where there's an emotional, psychological component that must be resolved in order to get to the end state. But you will get to the end state. If you imagine it and persist, you will get there. If you're willing to, do it, you will get there. Most people don't. And then they like to just talk about how you should have done it. That's what I've noticed. I spend, and I'm going to have to figure out a way to stop this. When I talk to people on Reddit, I would say I spend at least 50% of my time sort of futilely talking to people that I don't think are really getting anything I'm saying. Like, because I often respond to people if they tell me I didn't need to do something the way I did it. I try to explain to them why I did it that way, or why that might be necessary or whatever. And I just, if you weigh 300 pounds and you don't even have the slightest clue that at 120 you absolutely would not feel like the same person you are now. You would feel different. You would probably want different food. Naturally, you probably wouldn't want to do the things that you're doing now. Then of course you're going to think that that would be the ideal. Like sort of I don't know how to put it exactly. You can kind of sense a person's defeated mentality in the things that they want. There was another thread on there recently, and another thing that I always have to try to patiently defend is all the people that think that they want to do nothing and just get money. I've talked a lot about all the stuff I did to go from being broke to being not broke. And for me, that included doing different kinds of jobs. I never had a job for another person, but doing different kinds of work for myself and some jobs for other people, and eventually building a business where, you know, to get to the point I'm at now, which is what everybody says they want, which is basically I do what I want all day. I work like 2 hours a day. Well, seriously, I think I work about not even 15 hours a week. In order to get to the point where I had that, I chose to, I didn't have to, work a ton on a business. It was exhilarating. Like, if I would wake up, if I was in bed and some noise would wake me up after like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, I would start thinking about work, and I would get so like motivated and stoked. I had to get out of bed. Like, that's how I felt about the time that I spent working. But I've noticed that, you know, anytime I talk about that, I get a whole bunch of, that's not a manifestation. That's just you working hard. Well, why is it that I succeeded where others failed? And, you know, like, it makes me speechless, but I understand that from a certain mentality, you're going to think that what you really want is to not do anything, when really it's that you haven't found anything to do that you're really stoked about that makes money. And if you had that, you'd be getting out of bed in the morning. You know, I don't know too many non-depressed people who just really want to lay around all day. There's some, I'm sure. But for the most part, I think generally people think that they want something because really deep down they don't believe that they can really be something else. And I see that a lot with the work stuff on Reddit, especially when I talk about it. You know, there's just a lot of people that are like, I don't want to do anything. I want a guy to support me. You know what? You know who said the same thing when they were 22? Me. When I was 22, I had no idea what I wanted to do with myself. I was like going from thing to thing. I was still in the mentality where I just wanted to be able to support myself without having a job. And I mean, I was like, I had credit card debt, all kinds of shit. And I remember at the same time just having no clue and just saying, you know, I really just want to be a housewife. I've been engaged one other time briefly when I was 20 to a guy who was like totally all about me just being a stay-at-home wife and having kids and stuff. And that had been kind of like a nice little break from the mental struggle for what am I going to do with myself. And I had ended that relationship. I was just too young, and he was a great guy. And it was the same thing for me. I was just like, you know, I think I just want to find a guy who will pay for things, and, you know, I'll have some kids. Dude, I have never wanted kids. Like, this was the most delusional thing, this delusional thinking, and I see it in other people. I recognize it because I've been there. Is it that way for everybody? No, some people have a genuine desire to be the at-home partner. Of course. Like, I'm not saying that's everybody. But for a lot of people, this whole I don't want to work, I just want to win the lottery, I just want someone to take care of me, I just want to be a skinny person that eats everything in sight with impunity, that is not coming from a state where you can even really see anything. But it's coming from your low mental state. That's where those desires come from, for the most part. Of course, there's always exceptions. But it's really hard to know. It's really hard to, I think, feel confident that your desires change as you change unless you have actually gone through it. I don't know, you know, I do my best to like put something out there that will be positive, but what you think is what you want, especially if that desire is in like kind of a bad place, like you're really overweight and you know, you're trying to figure out what it is you would want. I think that can be really deceptive and tricky. And, you know, as long as you keep moving towards something, I think you will find that those things evolve. It's like your desires spring from your state, and then you change your state to something else, and then your desires change. They spring from the new state, and then you redefine, you whittle it down further. You know better what you want. You have a new experience, so it changes. You know, the whole thing is this process that starts with the initial intention and persisting in the state of what you think it is. So I think it's valid if you weigh 300 pounds. I don't know why I keep using that number. If you're uncomfortably overweight or whatever, and what you really think you would want is to be, you know, a slender person that can eat whatever they want, you know, that would still, at that weight, you would still be able to satisfy whatever these urges are you have to eat. I think that there is nothing wrong with attempting to just go from there, because it, you know, it will change over time. But, you know, you should at least be able to understand that that's how it works. Because if you don't really even understand that, I think you stand a good chance of, you know, really misusing this really powerful tool, you know, and creating some issues for yourself. You know, I'm seeing that to this day all over the place with people that don't really understand what they're doing. You know, creating some problems for themselves. So anyway, I hope that helps somebody. Have a great day.